Well, why don't I go in, and so we got people from all over the country, and there was one that said St. Albert in there, most in Toronto, but people all over the place. We do open this up to anybody. We don't really, you don't even have to be Canadian if you don't want, but you can pretend to be. And so I will cover a few slides. And again, I've never presented this way, so I have no idea what your experience is going to be like here. So if it's awful, let's blame Teams, not me, if that works. So I'll cover a few slides and we'll get into the Doug intro, and then we will turn it over to our gracious presenters today. So I think you should be seeing a second slide that says, hey, we're recording. Is that I see nods, so good. Then you're seeing what I'm seeing. So just so you know, you probably noticed it as soon as you came in, there was a notice. We do trim the beginning part off for the recordings, usually up to this part or to the presentation. So, but just be advised, we are recording this. We do share this with the Doug community. We want as many people to benefit from this great content as possible. So we do record all of these and make them available. So anything that you're saying, chatting, anything, if you're on cam, just know that we are recording. As I mentioned and promised, we would most certainly, and Diane had this, and she probably had it in last night, but if you missed it, the Blue Jays are moving on to the ALCS. If you don't know what the ALCS stands for, that's fine. It's not a Microsoft acronym, believe it or not. It's actually the American League Championship Series. I'm a huge baseball fan myself, so this was very big news. I wouldn't even watch the game because I'm convinced I'm bad luck to the Blue Jays, but I watched the score and kept refreshing and was very excited. I tried to catch the last out, but I missed it. So, and frankly, had I done it, the guy would have hit a home run anyway. So I'm glad I didn't get on. So exciting stuff. Glad we incorporated that into the mix today. So a bit about, oh, you were a Tigers fan.
I am a Red Wings supporter, so Tigers comes by nature. Could be a very interesting ALCS.
It could be.
Still Jays though.
It could be. It should be. It should be a good game tomorrow night. Seattle and Detroit. Yes. It's been a good series, so I'm excited about that. My pending face was deciding if we were still friends, but I think we're still friends because you said Toronto first, so we're good. So just kidding, of course. If you've never been to a game in Detroit, it's fantastic. Their stadium is phenomenal, so you should go. So here's today's agenda. So networking chat at the beginning is just kind of the casual start as people are flowing in and just chat through where people are at and whatnot. We will turn it over to Madison shortly for the Doug intro. And then today we've got from dashboards to decisions, how AI bends the analytics curve. So super excited to have Nick and Will presenting and guiding us through today. And so we will hand it over to them right after the Doug intro, and then we can sit back and learn. And if you've never heard either of them speak, you're in for a treat today. So, and then we will debrief. We say we debrief, but usually nobody ever wants to stick around. Everybody's busy and got lots of stuff to do. But if we want to have a quick chat about what we learned and what we saw and how we might apply it, then we're happy to stick around. We'd love to have that conversation with you. Just a reminder, as you know, if you've never been here before, put your hand up or use the chat. Throw a newbie in the chat if you've never been here before, because if you haven't, we'd just love to take a minute to stress. And even if you have been here, this is all about connection. So I encourage you to share your LinkedIn and connect with each other. Use the chat as the presentation's going on, interact with each other, share perspectives and thoughts. We have two great presenters who are going to share content, but I guarantee that they'd be more than happy to entertain your thoughts as they go, maybe not in the midst of the presentation, but as part of it, right, to understand where you stand with this concept of dashboards, the decisions and things like that. So use the environment for it. The entire premise of all of this is about connection and networking. So if you're not familiar with it, please leverage this for what it's worth, attend more in the future, build your network, build connections. The community around all of this stuff is just phenomenal. Shameless plug, and it's not a Doug thing, sorry, Madison, but it's not another group thing, it's just a me personal thing. I'm actually going to drop a link in the chat a little later to a LinkedIn post because I have a personal goal of delivering a keynote at a major conference somewhere, not necessarily in our space. I'm doing a webinar of that presentation next Wednesday, and so I'll drop it in. It's literally all about networking and connections and everything. So I'll share that with you. If you're interested in joining, please come out. Housekeeping. So I'm not going to tell you where the washrooms are because that would be weird. But I will tell you that we would love for you to mute your lines as the presenters are presenting. Please keep your background to a minimum, right? And if you have questions, use the raised hand feature if you would be so kind, or throw it in the chat. I'm not sure because we have dual presenters if you guys are going to be monitoring the chat or not today, but if we see stuff in the chat and it doesn't get addressed, I'll be sure to call it out at some point in the presentation when it's appropriate. Of course, be courteous. I think that goes without saying, but be respectful. And there, we live in a world now where people seem to think we can't disagree on things. I wholeheartedly disagree, and these environments are usually a safe, and more than not usually, they're always a safe space. So if you have a differing opinion, that is okay, and I encourage you to share it. Right, the part of learning is understanding different perspectives, and I think everybody here would totally embrace that. So, and join the meetup group if you haven't already. You can scan the code if you haven't done so. We can pull that back up later if you want. A couple of upcoming meetings we've got. November 13th, Robert, who's on this call, I saw his name. So he's going to be doing a Copilot powered Scrum. So how to build a Scrum team for successful Dynamics 365 implementation. I've seen part of, I don't know if it's the same one, but I've seen parts of that concept and Robert's Scrum related content. It's fantastic. So highly recommend that. And then we've got in December, Ashley Steiner. If you've never met Ashley, she's a great presenter, fantastic content all the time. We've had her up multiple times. So she has a session coming up on December 11th. And you can see we've got a couple silhouettes there because we're seeking presenters for January and February and beyond. So please, if you're interested, let us know. You're going to see a slide in a minute with a link and a QR code to a submission form. You can submit it or just email me. I'll throw my email and my LinkedIn in the chat. We can connect. If you're interested in presenting, we would always love to have any content. If it touches sort of the Dynamics ecosystem in some way, shape, or form, we would love to highlight it here and have you join us as a presenter. Duck Meetup, so some other groups that exist out there that we would encourage you to look at. And I know that's hard to click, and I think maybe when I present this way, these links are hot, so you should be able to actually click them. Can somebody test that?
Yes, it's working. I just checked it.
Oh, that's so cool. So
I didn't even know that.
So cool. I thought that might be the case, but I wasn't sure. So if there's one, I'll leave it on screen for another 20 seconds here. If there's something that you want to click, just click a bunch of them and get an idea. I can also resurface these links. But yeah, technology, man, true story. So pretty cool that you can click on that and join the mentorship program. Good call out, Robert. All right, I can throw those links back in if somebody wants them after. Other dynamic communities, communities about Dynamics out there. Lots of content available. More hot links for you to click. Going once, going twice. Gonna move on now. And then share your ideas. So the QR code or the link, apparently. This is a thing. This actually comes direct to me, which I'd love to change and kind of get it to multiple people. But if you have ideas, whether it's topics you'd like to see or things you'd like to present, please share it. We can connect and talk. We've had a number of different sessions over the years come up because people have submitted here. So please feel free. If you are sitting there thinking, I maybe could kind of present, but I don't know if I have a whole session worth, or I'm super not comfortable presenting, but I kind of wish I was, please still submit it and say that. We will partner with you, somebody. I will join with you and kind of skill up and learn whatever it is you want to present on, and we will present together. We are always seeking more content, right? From people, from individuals. We would love to foster your interest in speaking if you have it. And again, even if you're super nervous, don't think that submitting an idea means you're on the docket. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out a plan. Let's get you in there. Maybe it's like a 20-minute short presentation or a panel kind of thing. If you have an interest in speaking, please submit. We would love to work with you and help you get to a place where you're comfortable presenting. So please take advantage of that. All right, I see lots of chat action. I'm not actually reading it because I'm trying not to lose my train of thought, but I'll catch up here in a minute. I'm going to turn it over to Madison to talk through the Doug program and all of its fantastic offerings.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. Yeah, you guys have a great lineup of speakers. I love to see all the familiar faces. All right, well, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Madison Han. I am the event coordinator here at Doug. So I help run our local meetup program like this one, as well as our regional meetups that we have. So just a little bit about Doug. Doug, or Dynamics User Group, we're a free community for users, implementers, and resellers of Microsoft business applications. We mainly support D365, GP, Power Platform, a little bit of AI here and there, because there's this new thing called AI that's coming out these days. We really want to be able to give you some free education to learn and grow in your professional career as well as personal. We want to help you grow as best as you can. So we offer lots of different programs to help you get there. Our rules of engagement, Malcolm pretty much went over most of it. Just be respectful to people in this space. Please no sales pitches. We want everybody to come here and gain some free educational content, but not be sold a product. Ask questions, stay engaged with your speakers, make sure that you keep your mic muted while other people are presenting. I think you all know most of these things anyway. We can go to the next slide, Malcolm. So a little bit about what we offer. We have lots of different programs. We have some free online open discussion forums where you can ask a question to the community about a specific product and they can help answer. We have online webinars, some conferences that I'll get into in a minute. We have local meetups like this one, and we have them in person and virtual. Some are hybrid as well. If they're virtual, they get posted on our YouTube channel, like Malcolm had mentioned. So if you ever miss one of these meetups or are interested to see what people around the world are talking about, our YouTube channel is a great place to check all that out. We also have Convergence, which no, you can go ahead. I was going into that anyway. Convergence is one of our conferences that we are hosting. We're actually partnering with Microsoft for this event. It's mainly Microsoft led, so majority of their content. It will be December 9th through the 11th. For those of you that have been around for a while, you're probably pretty familiar with Convergence. So we're bringing it back a little bit different this year. We're going to start off a little bit smaller, probably around 1,000 people, and then hope to continue and grow it to maybe bring it back to what it once was. It'll mainly focus on AI and ERP. We'll have a little bit of CE and Power Platform content, but again, mainly driven by Microsoft and kind of hearing what it is they have to say. So come and join us. It'll be in Miami, December 9th through 11th. We also have DynamicsCon coming up in Vegas on May 12th through the 15th, 2026. This is a multi-day conference that focuses on all D365, Power Platform, AI, even some GP in there. We are offering our early bird pricing going on right now for $9.99. If you're interested in attending, you can scan that QR code and get involved. It's a really great way to get involved in the community and get to see some familiar faces. And we always say it's like a high school reunion because everybody in the space just somehow knows each other. So it's always a fun time, and we'd love to have you there. And we have I need to update this, but it's 2026 DynamicsCon regionals that are coming up soon. We just completed our 2025 regionals. We were just in Texas for our last one. And we're now in the middle of planning for 26. We're going to have all of these announced the first week of November. So stay tuned on LinkedIn and all of your social medias. You'll see big announcements there where we're going to announce all of our regionals for 26 and all of our sponsorship prospectuses as well.
I see a question in the chat, Madison, about when the call for speakers for any of these events might come up.
For the regionals, it kind of depends on if we do a call for speakers. If you're interested in attending or speaking at any of them, you can just reach out to me directly and I can get your session submitted to the leaders of that group. These are all community led. So we have people in the community that are the ones that select the sessions that get posted and added to the agenda. So if you ever want to come and speak at any of them, we would encourage all of you to do so. Again, great way to get involved in the community. So if you ever want to, you can just send me send me your session details and I'll get it to the leaders. DynamicsCon, we are hoping to get speaker submissions out by January. So we haven't selected anything yet. It's going to be pushed back a little bit due to convergence this year. But we're still going to have them like normal, and those call for speakers will come out shortly, and we'll make sure to post it and let all the meetup leaders know, all of you guys know. So as soon as we have it open, we will let you know.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you for the overview, Madison, and we will make sure that that slide gets updated. Sorry about that. And so that then brings us to today. So super excited to have a couple people presenting today. So Nick and Will that are going to guide us through the session I talked about earlier. And yes, for the record, Nick is related to Robert, if you're thinking and asking, because he's already been asked twice on this call. And so jokes aside, I am super excited. I've never heard Nick speak before, but I have heard Will speak before. As I said, I know you're in for a treat. Read up a little bit and kind of got some background information on what this was going to be all about. I'm super excited about today. So I will stop rambling. I'm going to turn it over to you guys, and you guys can take over the sharing and wow us with all of your content. So over to you guys.
All right. Well, thank you, Malcolm. I appreciate the fantastic introduction. Hey, everybody. It's so great to be back. Definitely love this group a lot and very honored to get the chance to jump on the stage again, talk about a really great topic with another really fantastic speaker. Nick is a fantastic Power BI partner that I've had the chance of working with quite a few times now. And we were actually having a discussion about this probably late last year, and kind of the role that AI was playing in BI and business intelligence. And so, yeah, I'm very grateful and honored to get to share the stage with him today and present that stuff. So, Nick, do you have anything that you want to add before we get into things?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is my first time in this particular Dynamics user group, so it's nice to finally be here, even though I'll get into this a bit with my explanation of myself and my background. But even though I am more on the analytics side and Power BI side, I started actually as a Dynamics user with Business Central, and then kind of the dynamic sales part of the ecosystem. So it's nice to be able to present this while also having that background, kind of understanding how frustrating it can be sometimes to get what you want out of the analytics side. So yeah, it's nice to be here and nice to see all these new faces in the community.
Amazing. Malcolm, do we have 45 minutes or an hour? Just trying to remember.
Yes. So you can take, this is scheduled until 2:15.
Okay.
So as much time as you want, I guess.
Perfect.
Perfect. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Well, yeah, just to kind of kick things off, I mean, most of you know me. If we haven't met before, it's really great to get the chance to meet you virtually, and would love to meet you in person. My name is Will Hawkins. Like I mentioned, I'm based out of Toronto. I'm the lead data scientist and founder of Rightway AI. We're a people-centered AI engineering company specializing in helping Microsoft ISVs, partners, and end customers in developing their AI capabilities. I come from the cloud AI world. I was originally an Azure data scientist, an AI engineer there, and have made my way over to the Dynamics and Power Platform ecosystem, and really enjoyed this community, especially, and the way it's opened its arms up to myself. And yeah, that's part of why I've ended up being a Copilot Studio MVP, and how I've gotten more involved with this group, and really privileged to get the chance to share some great information with you guys. I'll hand it over to Nick for a little bit about him.
Sure. So my name is Nick Triggs. As Malcolm said, I'm related to another person in the Triggs family name in the ecosystem, if you know him as well. But I started my career, as I mentioned, as an ERP consultant and a user of Business Central. I also am certified with Microsoft, both the Power Platform and the Dynamics side. And through that kind of experience with these bigger partners in the past, I went down that road of consulting and then finally found my space within data and analytics. I really love that aspect of cleaning the data and making sure that it makes sense for everyone reading it, right? And yeah, I founded my own company called Alara. as you can see, these pictures here, that's actually Japan, where I used to live doing consulting. So if anyone has ever been to Japan or any experience there, please don't hesitate to message me afterwards. I love talking about it. I swear I bring it up in like every conversation. Um, and yeah, I started my my journey there, and I came back to Canada and have my own practice now. So I guess I'll hand it off back to Will to continue the presentation.
Yeah, so as the title obviously alluded to, this is going to be about something called AI, because apparently that's an important topic in the world today. But we kind of wanted to talk about it through the lens of what we've both experienced in the analytics side of the house. Myself on more of the data engineering and data platforming aspect of things, and Nick in the Power BI reporting, and really what kind of came to be known, and it is fully Nick's creation, I think, or at least to the best of my knowledge, the idea of the analytical maturity model, and what that means for businesses in terms of being able to make their data actionable. So that's really what we're hoping to focus on with this session, is kind of help you understand where the maturity gaps may be within your organization's reporting and just overall data platforming aspect, and then where AI can fill those gaps and also accelerate your analytics journey. As the title probably alluded to, we're really looking at ways of bending that curve with the capabilities of artificial intelligence. And here's kind of the main ways that we're going to go through that. So we'd like to kind of run through kind of where you guys are at from an analytics perspective, what Nick and I have seen as being common bottlenecks for companies that are trying to make progress on their analytics journey, and how that can affect your own. And then, really just tee up where AI fits into that. What kind of acceleration options are there for that? For example, if you're using it for doing data entry, right, like AI OCR, or using LLMs to, reparse information so that it's cleaner to use later down the line. And of course, drop any questions that you'd like in the chat, because we'll be doing the same. So without further ado, that is kind of where we wanted to go first, is really kind of pose for you guys, an option to do a little bit of self-reflection in terms of how confident are you in your organization's ability to turn data into decisions? Where do you think your organization's analytics journey truly stands? Feel free to throw any thoughts that you have in the chat about that. Nick, I'm curious, across the companies that you've worked with, what kind of things are you seeing in terms of how people feel about their ability to turn data into decisions?
Yeah, I always find that it starts off with the people who want to make the decisions most. So usually, obviously, that's executives and people at the top of the companies who want to make sure they're getting the insights that they need. But if that's going to be the driver of the decision to get into the analytics space, a lot of the times what ends up happening is you jump to this point of getting these reports, dashboards, whatever your chosen analytics is. In this case, obviously, we're talking about Power BI. Jump to this tool instead of actually building an infrastructure and a foundation to get themselves prepared for that tool. And then all of the benefits that come with that. And AI, obviously, it's a hot topic that Will has mentioned. AI is a part of not only the analytics journey and something that's trendy, but something that can leverage this foundation that takes BI and AI and kind of puts it together. So yeah, I've always seen that in all the companies I work with, right? It's just driving that decision and then skipping to that analytics part without that foundation built there in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love Malcolm's point. Some areas I'd say are very confident, other areas less so. The areas I'm confident in are the areas we're constantly paying attention to, no surprise. And the other areas that are less confident are the ones where less attention is paid attention to. What are your thoughts on that, Nick?
Yeah, like 100%. And when it comes to paid attention to, I'm assuming that means things that are really important for the business to run, obviously, because that's where you're going to leverage those analytics points the most. But again, with the push of AI, we're starting to see all this data that's being created inside the company, outside of the company, all these different things that you can leverage that people are now saying, when are we going to be able to leverage this data? When in reality, you've only focused on that uh, uh, area that you're confident in, right? So nothing is really available for you to use, and you have to re-engineer the entire platform to get this data into something that's useful for your organization, right? So I definitely agree with that for sure, but then just highlights the areas that you need to become more confident in to make sure that you're getting use of this data. Yeah, and on that note, just pausing for a second. Does anyone have any idea what this model is? I mean, you can just raise up your hand or put it in the chat. Has anyone seen this before? This isn't my model or anything. I
It's new
just
to
use it a
me, to be
lot.
honest.
Yeah, yeah, I guess it's pretty new. Okay, no one's raising their hand, so I'm assuming not many people have seen it. That's okay. Yeah, I was just curious if anyone's knowledgeable about this so far. So this is basically a company's map for their data maturity and analytical journey. So if you see here on the bottom left, we have our foundational data, or rather the foundation that you would set up to then build your data. And the easiest example of something like this is Excel. Everyone knows Excel. It's not the best tool, obviously, but it's there. You can use it. You can report on it. You can do whatever you want on it, right? Is it the best tool? You know, for going up this curve, not necessarily, but that foundation is where your data is stored, and then you could start using it, right? As you go up this curve, you start answering these questions of going to the next block. What happened? Why did it happen? Right? What will happen? How we can make it happen, and then eventually simulating human thought, which is the idea of using AI as part of that analytics journey eventually, right? So it's using this map to take where the data is currently, answering all these different questions, and then effectively mimicking human thought so that users can utilize their technology in a way that leverages all available tools out there. If you want to go to the next slide, Will.
Hmm.
So another way to think about this too, I think there's one more there. Yeah, another way to think about this too is to go from hindsight to insight to foresight, right? So those first two blocks there are foundation and descriptive. You already have that data. So that's asking, you know, where, again, using the Excel example, where is it? And then descriptive being what actually happened with that data. That's your historical sales, that's your historical inventory information, all that historical stuff, right? And as you move farther, you start to say, okay, now that we have all of our historical data ordered and analyzed, why did it actually happen, right? Why were we forecasting way more than we sold? Why were we selling all this inventory for products that we didn't even plan on selling, right? It starts getting to that idea of not only exploring that historical analysis, but understanding what actually happened at a deeper level in those two questions, why and what. And then as you keep going along to the end, you start to, you know, see those trends, see what your organization is doing, and answer these questions of, okay, how can we actually make what we want happen, right? Using that forecast example, we forecasted for products that we didn't even sell. How can we make it so that we do sell those products, right? And then obviously the very top end, simulating human thought would just be the analytics actually doing that decision making for you, and then you and the company start to do whatever you need to make sure that happens. So it's this trend line of hindsight to insight to foresight.
Yeah, and I kind of liked Malcolm's mention in the comment there about, you know, it being really going from just the raw information up to actual like tribal knowledge or wisdom, right? And I know a book that I was given a long time ago when I first started my data career was called Data Story by Nancy Duarte. And, you know, there's a really great TED talk that she's done where she actually takes all of the like really big speeches from around the world, like, you know, Martin Luther King's, I can't remember, there's a few other ones. And she literally mapped like the flow of the speech had the same flow on paper in terms of the interaction and the cadence and everything like that. And you know, that was really a way of recognizing how humans process information, right? And this is no different, right? Like why we have such a difficult time earlier on in the curve is because we're so designed for taking information as a narrative and kind of plotting out where we think that narrative is going to go next, right? And without having that really good understanding and story behind what the data means, it's really hard to use it in an effective way.
Yeah, and just to add to that point, you know, obviously we're going to get to some numbers here where the companies are in the industry today on this curve. But when you get to that foresight side, it seems, you know, it seems really difficult, especially because it says simulating human thought, right? I mean, that seems really difficult, right? But if you think about it, a lot of times people know where we're heading anyways, but yet there's a lack of preparation to even get there, right? I'm going to use a really general example here. The pandemic that happened. Pretty much every scientist everywhere predicted something like that was going to happen in the future, and none of us were prepared, right? And it doesn't mean that we didn't think about it. It's just we had other things to do. And so part of this analytical journey is to understand that a lot of the analytics to predict and foresee is low-hanging fruit that you can do not that in not a difficult way, especially with today's technology. Like I like AI now because it's trendy, because it's pushing people, which we'll get into later, pushing people into this curve a lot faster. If you want to go to the next slide, Will. And so what we have here, um, just one more. Yeah, so what we have here is this branch of where most companies are actually struggling today to get into the analytics side. And it might seem counterintuitive because you might think to yourself, and maybe you can even think of your organization today, you know, oh, I have reports, I have Power BI reports, I have analytics that I'm using that are pretty good. But that is, like, you may be right, it's working and everything, but that is something that your organization has made usually without the discipline to actually build that foundation. If you go one more slide, Will. This is 43% of most companies globally, including Fortune 500 companies, are struggling here because of the distribution of where they are on this curve. And if we see the other numbers for the rest of the blocks, all of them together, you can see most people are in the middle. So they're actually farther along the curve, something that's supposed to be stepped, right? Before they get the foundation and descriptive analytics done. Going back to that example I just had with your own organizations, you'll have those reports, but think about how difficult it was actually to get the data into that model to get that report for you or that dashboard, right? And most companies do that once. They stick with that diagnostic part and then they just leave it, right? Or even the predictive part. Those initial two blocks are where most companies are struggling, and yet they need to leverage those first two blocks in order to get the rest. Right? That's why this is a map that helps a company understand where they are in their own analytical journey.
Yeah, I would even add too, like I know one thing I've said many times in my role as a data scientist is honestly 90% of the work isn't even doing forecasting, modeling, or anything. It's just getting the data in a place where you can do something with it.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And again, these statistics are Fortune 500 companies, and that's even a larger scale, right? Because they're making so much data every day. I've had companies making, you know, 1 million records of data probably every couple days, and it's not impossible, obviously, to make this foundation, but it becomes really difficult when you rely on that data to report on and to run your company, yet you need to fix it in order to build whatever the hell else you need to build to go up this curve and leverage technology at what we expect today, right? If we want to go to the next slide. Okay, so what's actually changing in AI? So what we've talked about this curve. We've talked about that hindsight to foresight, where we want to be, right? We want to be up there on the curve. And we've also talked about on the first two blocks where most companies are ignoring and just building, right? So what's happening today actually is that AI is increasing this development speed for all these different products on the actual curve, right? So think of this as, your LLMs, the chatbots that you have. It's pretty easy to learn how to not expertly program or anything, obviously. You can't replace people still with that kind of stuff, but it's bridging the gap between getting them technically savvy in order to actually develop things in the in using your tools in that ecosystem of products that you have, right? So that development speed is really being changed with LLMs and moving yourself in, across the curve into those different blocks. The other point here is also development quality shifts in what you're spending your time on. So because a lot of the times, as I mentioned, the LLMs helps you with programming, development, maybe gathering requirements, all that kind of stuff. The necessity for this kind of BI doesn't go away. It's actually just with these changes, it doesn't go away. It's actually just shifting at what points of the development cycle of a report, let's say, are more important. So it's less technical things that are more important now in the life cycle of software and particularly BI. So we're seeing that, I'm seeing that a lot, pretty much in every project where it's people still want so many reports, right? People still want so many dashboards, but the quality is drastically increasing. And then finally, it's speeding up, as I mentioned, the adoption of this curve from each point. Ideally, you want to go up the curve, but AI is still affecting each point. Maybe some people are ready for cognitive stuff. Obviously they're going to implement it. Not a lot of people are. Maybe people are ready for foundational stuff, and they're going to use AI to implement that as well. So it's increasing this adoption.
Have you seen any of your customers leveraging LLMs for any of their Power BI development?
Yeah, I've seen it. It's still difficult without that foundation, right? And normally if they do, there's still issues with strategy and kind of answering the questions that they want with the development. But yeah, I've definitely seen them trying to leverage it themselves, and sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's not, right? It really depends on the skill level of the person, because you still need someone to oversee those chatbots, right? So that's always the make or break point there in the company, even if they use it themselves. Okay, so going through, I'm just going to go through each of those points. So the LLMs, the development increase, and then the quality increase. So for the development speed, specifically in Power BI, we're seeing a lot of, increase speed with the actual development tools there. So if you're familiar with Power BI, if anyone's used it before, the programming languages or coding languages inside of Power BI are DAX, measures, M code, which is the Power Query language to transform data, SQL, which is obviously that data source and ingestion. I just put SQL there. I know there's a lot of other different languages there for anyone who's technical. But just basically SQL is going to be the point at which AI right now is really helping in development. And then finally visualizing it, which is more custom stuff using Python and R. So all of these different programming languages on every segment of the tech stack, obviously it's increasing the development speed drastically. We know that, right? I mean, we know you can learn how to code at a basic level with LLMs today. But we're still seeing that that speed up development quality. I use it in pretty much every one of my projects. So projects that used to, require 40 hours, now they're, 30 or 20. And more importantly than that, if we go to the next slide, well, more importantly than that, you have practical examples like this where you leverage other functions in Power BI that you wouldn't have gotten to because you spent all that time programming, right? Now you can leverage things like this where you have this is just an example I have here of code that we used with LLMs and things like ChatGPT in order to give us dynamic aging buckets. So typically when you do aging buckets for receivables, if you guys are familiar with ERP systems, it's intervals of 30 days, 60 days, and 100 days. So this dynamic function inside the report um, allowed us to actually filter it between those age receivables. So we can do 15 one day, 2 years, all these different live dynamic intervals that we could add. Before, no projects ever got to that level before LLMs, but now we could actually have that discussion because it's so much easier to program, right? Because it's leveled the playing field in terms of people's access. So now we can have that requirement and find really easily how Power BI can be used as a tool and the rest of the stack too. But Power BI as a tool to be able to uh, to get that dynamic interface working for the customer, and obviously they can use it in a much better way. Yeah, you have a question, Will?
Yeah, I was curious how this shapes how you go into developing a Power BI report. Like, would you use this primarily to do more of the calculations and then you focus on like the actual UX UI of the report, or like what does the kind of workflow look like with an LLM involved?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about how it was before, and then I'll talk about with the LLM. So before, we spent not a lot of time on deep requirements because so much of the time is limited by all of our resources, knowledge, including myself, of Power BI, right? So before we just had basic level discussions about their KPIs, their visuals, whatever we would need. Now, as you mentioned, it did shift towards more of that design, more workflow focused, where requirements, the projects still take the same amount of length almost, other than some of the development time. Is less, but we're having lots more conversations about how the report can be the best it can possibly be, right? Which isn't really intuitive. When AI came out, everyone thought it was going to replace people and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure some of that everyone's fearful of. But for at least the projects that I've seen, it's just shifted the time spent on more important things, right? For these reports. So again, that dynamic example, I wouldn't have even gotten to that when we did projects before AI. Now that we have it, the discussions are unlimited, right? The discussions have no barriers because now we're not burdened by people's technical level because we can ask ChatGPT and get some answers to actually make really, really good reports that everyone uses every day, which
It's
is great.
amazing.
Yeah, I know it's been great. And going to the next slide here, development quality. That's that's where we've seen it the most specifically, these user interactions and user workflows. So as I mentioned in the slide here, that ease of technical development has equaled an emphasis on non-technical parts of the project. Again, requirements gathering, display, uh, the design of the reports, having reports directly into the person's workflow. You can leverage other parts of the Power Platform to do this too, right? But it makes things actually useful for people. And I'm sure people in the chat can think about this with their own Dynamics instances, right? Or reports. Like how many reports do you have and how many reports do you actually need, right? The last thing I always tell customers all the time, the last thing you need is more reports. You just need better ones, right? Because no one likes to look at too many things. So using this example here, this was a previous report that I just took off Google Images. This is what people are kind of used to when they think of Power BI. At least I was when I started. Just plopping stuff down, pie graphs with like 100 different, slices and all that kind of stuff. But now with the emphasis of development quality, things like UI, UX, as the lists I point out here, identity access, the strategy of actually adopting the report and dashboard inside your organization, the data context, so like understanding what you're reading on the report, because sometimes it can be complicated, the architecture, governance, all these other points of a BI project that were previously ignored or just didn't have the budgets or time to spend on now are being much more focused on, and so that gives more success to the people implementing it, and then also the customers using it. And if we go to the next slide, I give an example of it's just one that we made, but an example of report and design of what this would look like in practice. So as I say in that point there, it's no longer simply about getting data on a dashboard. It's actually using it, right? It's actually making it useful for the organization, so that they can open it every day. They can send the data that they need when they need it with the relevant people that they need to send it to, internal, external, whatever the use case is. The possibilities are really limitless. And now users expect this kind of better designed BI reports, where that previous example was just, again, things plop down onto the BI report, right? And no one uses that. Like, I'm not going to open that if I don't understand it. And like I said here, the skills required are less technical because AI has been changing that development flow. So now things are much more useful for everyone involved.
And how does it change the maintenance of the reports?
So that's actually a really good question. So I think I know what you're getting at here, but let me just explain what I'm thinking. So if you're using LLMs to develop everything, and you don't know what you're developing, then if people use it and it breaks, what the hell do you do, right? So ultimately, this depends on the people who are implementing it, right? Again, you want to make sure you're having resources that understand still what they're doing, but can understand where AI's limitations are. And then documenting what you're doing is so important, right? Because it's important too, even when you have no AI, right? Because if you have someone in your organization who makes everything and then they leave, you're stuck. You're stuck maintaining that too, right? So it's the same problem, really. It's just instead of a human, it's an AI. So documentation, again, going to this project emphasis, documentation is also a part of that governance and emphasis that these projects have actually spent more time on, which has previously been ignored. And I'm sure you guys have seen this in your own organizations where not even BI, but Dynamics or whatever software, governance is starting to be something everyone's talking about because of this ownership problem with all the data that AI is generating and you are telling it to generate. So I've seen stuff with customers where they have users in their own organization document it. Obviously my company, we document that kind of stuff when we do implementations so that it makes sense, and adoption is really important for that, especially with something custom. But yeah, it's still shifting everything towards those components of projects that are usually previously ignored. I actually am curious to you, Will, as well, because I'm talking about all this from a Dynamics kind of fabric, but also the Power BI space. For you, what have you seen in the fabric space with that maintenance part? Because I feel like it's much more complicated than maybe the data sets used in Business Central and Dynamics and stuff like that. It can be big, but it's not as big as fabric, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest thing, right, is the maintainability of actionable information that's coming out of an AI or a BI system can change over time, right? Like, I know something I encourage a lot of my customers with is understanding, you know, concepts like data drift and model drift, because, you know, when you're using these things to gather insights or for making decisions, like even if I've built a Power BI report for cross reporting, the entire reason that that's valuable is because it's a reflection of reality. If something happens upstream in my data that no longer makes a reflection of reality, it's kind of like I'm walking backwards. You know, I'm now creating problems rather than solutions to different things.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why you know, I think everyone's still learning how to leverage these technologies, including me. But that's why the emphasis on documentation to me is so important, because clear requirements, right, means clear development, means clear reports, means clear data, means clear decisions, and your company succeeds, right? To me, all those 5 points, you need that documentation throughout it. AI, whoever owns it, right? Whether it's AI or people, um, you still need that understanding of what you're building, regardless. And then you use AI to help that.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, I really love Josh's point about descriptions on fields and how they can make or break AI. Because I know with customer projects, like when you have an AI system reading data, if you don't explain to it what that data means, don't be surprised when the results are kind of strange. You know, like for example, with one customer, we've been building a system that the agent is hooked up to their database, and we've had to like map out like this when you ask about, you know, this part of their EDI, this is what it means, right? Like you have to understand that when you're calling this endpoint, the arguments that you're passing are related to this aspect of what they're asking about. So, you know, I think if anything that the descriptions actually become a necessity rather than an optionality, because, you know, if you don't have it, especially like I know for very like rigid, I guess, use cases where you need that high level of accuracy. Like most people don't even realize that if you don't set the temperature on a model to 0, it can get creative. And so it will make up information and create those hallucinations and those kind of things, especially with the lack of understanding of how to build the story off of the data, is only going to create more problems than solutions, right?
Yeah, and I think to pull it back to you know, the beginning of the presentation, I'm just thinking of the curve in my mind right now. To me, that's just a description of what you want from the middle of it, without ignoring those first 2 blocks, or not even ignoring it, but just not realizing that you don't even have that, like descriptions as the example. And what you said about the AI's context, right? Those first 2 blocks again. That's a perfect example of how we jump to the middle and you know, of the curve, or even larger with AI, without even considering those other blocks, right? So yeah, it's interesting. Just want to go to the next slide. And then yeah, so finally, I guess to round those 3 points up. So we talked about the development speed, AI is increasing, the shift in projects with AI. This last part here of actually speeding up the adoption curve. That, you know, the access that I refer to is really just the trend of AI unlocking all these different products, but also making people aware of these products that they wouldn't even have considered before, like Fabric, for example. I think it came out 3 years ago. Obviously, it was maybe a different platform or called something else. I don't know the history, but Fabric, Microsoft Fabric, I never was even aware of until all this AI stuff started happening, and I'm like, oh my God, okay, now data actually matters in terms of, well, it always did, but the data integrity matters a lot more, because we're going to get bombarded with all these new tools and the data that they create. So the access of just these AI products knowledge, that lowered cost of actually buying these products because of the availability of AI flooding the market. The lower cost of human capital here, right? Of just, again, with that example I gave before of upskilling resources with AI and the LLMs developing reports. That education, all the typical things, right? This is not, it's all pretty intuitive, right? All these different access that um, we now have to AI has sped up the curve at every point, and specifically, that's why I have these two blocks here, specifically with those 2 points here, which I'm happy about. I know Will's happy about too, because now people are asking about governance in conversations, whereas before no one cares. No one cared about that, right? Now
Yeah.
people are interested and they're like, hey, what if I actually, what if I do use this AI to create something and my person who made it actually has no idea what they're doing, or what if I make it and then a year down the line I forget what the hell I prompted, but it's so
Yeah.
integral, it's so integral to my company's reporting or whatever it is, that there's no way that I'm going to find whatever I did and understand it too. Or it adds more time to do that, right? So all of that hype and AI and like everything, as those last 2 points say, has, in my opinion, majorly affected these first two blocks of the curve, which is a good thing, right? We want that to happen so that people are more aware of where they need to spend most of their time in the organization on getting themselves ready for the rest of the curve.
Yeah. I mean, it opens up, I think to me, what I've seen at least is the governance conversation becomes more important because there's regulations that are in response to that AI hype that are, making it something you're liable for if you're mishandling data by feeding it through an AI model and not, considering things like privacy or even just, traceability, right? Like if you can't accurately audit, how the AI transformed your data and be able to revert it back for whatever reason, that's part of why this governance is super important at the beginning, because having that foundation set up so that you have that level of transparency has multiplicative benefits, for your reporting pipelines, for just your overall data products, and then in case you get audited about any AI related activity, all that information is well documented, like you mentioned.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of years with all this kind of stuff. I think it's cool to see that governance specifically be impacted by this trend of a and new technology, whatever you want to call it, right? Because obviously I think it's here to stay. So if you look at, other industries, and to me, the thing that comes to mind is when the internet was popularized, right? And invented, I guess, and everyone started using it. All the talk was about online scamming and stuff. I remember when I was younger, not putting my credit card online, and now I wouldn't even think about it, right?
Mhm.
I don't care. Like I use it all the time. Whereas before I would be really hesitant to put my credit card on a website, a web
Yeah.
page or whatever, right? And so that gave birth to a lot of these kind of industries focused on data security. For example, I don't have any what's it called, cybersecurity on my computer. Nothing that I pay for, at least. I just use free stuff. Whereas before, everyone had that, right? It's the same kind of concept with, I think, governance. And unlike cybersecurity on your computer, though, I think that governance is definitely here to stay because everyone needs ownership of data. So it's just interesting to see how these little industries are being affected and popping up with AI being so popular, right?
Yep. It's a very popular topic. I like Malcolm's point. This is fascinating. We've been leaning heavily on AI for a lot of things, and not really thought about getting data and stats from it. But clearly, this is absolutely something to be thinking about. Well, Malcolm, that is probably the best segue could have asked
Yeah.
for into talking about how AI can be leveraged beyond the reporting layer. Something that always comes up with AI projects that I've done is how can I talk to my data, which I think is such an interesting concept because some people want to see it in this great, beautiful mural of like what it means and stuff. But I think as we've gotten more familiar with natural language and prompting, that natural language query expectation is becoming more and more apparent, right? And for anyone who's seen or played with Power BI Copilot, that's a perfect example, right? Like actually having your report be talkable, if that's even a word, or having your data model be something that's talkable. And why that's important to mention is because with that being the expectation of business users, it's good to start planning for that at the foundation level, right? Because if you think about where your reports and where your data is leveraged, it's almost always, I mean, yes, you have data hygiene in IT, but it's mainly for business activity, right? And the business users' expectations change. So now it's about how can we reflect those changes and how things are done from an upstream perspective. And so that's kind of why I think the best way of looking at AI beyond the reporting layer is its role in intelligent data platforming. So not just understanding the data, but actually having it figure out how to get actions out of it sooner. Like for example, one agent that I've built in the past was for a property management company, and normally you'd have to go in and kind of aggregate all the properties, do a filter to figure out the regions and stuff like that, and that probably takes a very power user maybe like 30 seconds to 45 seconds, something like that, right? You go into your agent that can interact with that data model and say, hey, can you pull up like the gross leasable amount for Toronto or something? Obviously latency included, but like you're getting that answer in 5 to 10 seconds. So the actual way of consuming information and taking action on it has shifted as a result of being able to use this technology throughout the entire life cycle of the data pipeline. And so that's really where we've started to implement it as far upstream as possible to help kind of facilitate data being ready to be consumed in that way, right? It's kind of like if you go to ChatGPT and you say, hey, I want to build an agent, can you write me a system prompt? It's going to write you a much more verbose system prompt or instruction for your Copilot or agent than you could just on your own, right? And then it knows what is going to be expected from a natural language query perspective. So it's kind of like you're preparing for things to be consumed in the way you're using the same tool to prepare the things to be consumed in the same way. Like, I don't know what a good example is, but it's kind of like building a house with the blueprint, knowing like how people are going to walk through it and what the kind of flow and experience is going to be, right? And so that's where you see AI becoming really important for data cleaning, even just data entry, right? Like one of the solutions that I've worked a lot on is AI OCR and just taking information off of paper files and properly putting it in, because most often some of the traditional OCR tools will, not work, and then you end up having people sitting there entering data manually, and the risk of human error in that is pretty large, because if anybody has tried to move data over from one file to another, you have 9 other things distracting you at the same time, you're going to mess up a cell or you're going to mess up a column, and then you're going to have to go back and redo it. And it just makes it a very tricky process, right? So using it in that way is incredibly valuable. And then actually using it to kind of infer and understand the information beforehand, right? So classify, like, what does this mean? Like when I see my lead come in, is this a lead for an account that we've seen in the last 5 years? Okay, I'm probably going to classify that as something that means something different than a new one, right? And like understanding based off of, for example, an email that's coming in, what that means, right? And kind of programming that business logic so that you can hydrate the information ahead of time and enrich the data set. And that actually creates more cohesive data. So that's where the connection layer really comes in, is it's now able to infer relationships because it's hydrating the base layer of data. So the information coming into the system, whether that's through OCR or through some kind of text-based email situation, so it has a better handle on what information is available to infer things off of. So it's going to increase the ability to actually compose an understanding of what that information means, and then filter out what needs to be seen downstream, right? For example, and we'll talk about it a little bit in the next slide, but one kind of common approach that we've used in Microsoft Fabric is the medallion architecture, and I'll go through more of the details of that in a moment. But kind of the main idea is to have a specific area of your data platform designed for analytics. And what that means really from a composability perspective is building AI systems that enrich and build data sets upstream for particular tasks like Power BI reporting, right? Like you have a specific way that you're going to pre-aggregate information for a Power BI report, like we were talking about earlier with the DAX queries. You can write that up front and kind of explicitly define your measures and KPIs, based off the information that's coming in, not just the information that you've loaded into the report.
Right. Yeah.
And so that, really gives you the ability to kind of standardize and scale that standardization earlier upstream. Like if you've got 1,000 rules for how to clean your data, you can hire a whole data hygiene team to do that, or you can start looking at how LLMs can enforce those rules, or how machine learning models, for example, can check things like schema drift. Like, hey, this column's been renamed like 5 times in the last week. Maybe it's something that we need to check to see if there's an integrity problem, or for some reason in the last month, there's been a lot of nulls in the primary key column, which is not good, right? So why is that happening? And so, yes, it can be very useful in terms of getting information ready to be reported on, but its ability to automate, the ability to create intelligent data and insights is very profound. And so like I mentioned, that's kind of where the medallion architecture and Microsoft Fabric really shine, in my opinion. And, if this is something you've seen before, I always say, I had a friend in university, and I remember I sat down with him, and he was working on something that we had done like 2 years earlier. And I was like, why are you working on that? And he's like, well, you're never too good at the fundamentals. And that's kind of a notion that I've always approach things by. And so even in re-looking at the medallion architecture, there's new things that you can look at and see, oh, now I have a new way of adding, my LLM or my machine learning model in this part of the process. And so basically the ability for moving data through the life cycle, right? So bronze is really about landing the information exactly as is. So just, basically taking raw information right out of the API and plopping it into a lakehouse, just doing very minimal transformations. Whereas silver is, to me, more where you're building your data products. So in the example of data hygiene, this is where you've standardized all your column names, you've cleaned out any duplications, you've removed any unnecessary nulls, and you've kind of done like a health check to say, hey, this is basically what we have from a data perspective. Here's the operational information that we want to use. And then the gold layer is really where you start to layer in that business logic, whether that's for a Power BI report, so building out those pre-aggregated measures, or if it's for a machine learning job, like creating feature sets. And then at the same time, there's that gold platinum area of creating AI-ready data sets. And this is particularly useful in Microsoft Fabric because I believe it was March this year, they announced Fabric data agents, and that's probably something you guys have at least heard of or possibly explored. And that's basically giving you the ability to interact with your Fabric data through things like Copilot Studio or Azure AI. Well, the great part is because you've implemented this medallion architecture, you can kind of plan for that upstream, right? If you know that the data set that you want to use for your Copilot is a sales order table, for example. Well, how can I make my sales order table ready to be used by a Copilot as earlier upstream as I can, right? Because then you're not trying to make all of these transformations on the fly. And this is something that I've learned from doing a couple different AI agent projects, because the way that an LLM interprets data is not going to be the same way that a person interprets a Power BI report. It's really going to be, is it pulling the right information and then presenting it the right way? If you ask for, give me the last 5 orders in the system, it's going to go through, collect that information, and then just spit out, here's the information, right? It's not going to infer, oh, they want to see like what the trend was or not, or what the, the average price of the order was or something like that, right? The system is not going to know that ahead of time. So this is kind of where you end up in this really interesting bifurcation where, because of having the data move through a life cycle where you're preparing it to be used by things like AI or Power BI downstream, you actually kind of make it something that's useful for those systems ahead of time, and plan for it right from the very beginning. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know if that if anybody has any questions or anything. I think this is a good example to help kind of drive it home, because this is something that we actually implemented with a customer where they essentially had over 25 different data sources, and they had a whole division that was dedicated to doing manual like deduping and standardization of columns and record enriching, like going and looking at people's addresses and pulling in more information to help kind of build out that customer 360. And so what we did was create a silver layer where you have that data product, and then add in AI capabilities to do that enrichment and record creation. Like if, for example, you need to do an address lookup, can the agent see on input, hey, this new record that came in overnight, the address looks wrong, like it's missing the street or the road or the whatever. Can I go and double check it with the API that we use to do address lookups to make sure that it's a valid address, right? So these are things that you can start to programmatically add into your data pipeline so that by the time that reaches human consumption, whether that's doing Power BI reporting or through an AI agent, it's kind of like what we talked about earlier in terms of being able to simulate that human thought, right? Like a lot of the information is already ready for you to just come in and infer. It becomes a very like prescriptive or kind of like subscribing to your data platform and being able to get the information the way that you want. And so that's a technique that we're starting to explore with them, that seems to be pretty effective, because obviously it takes a massive burden off of the people in terms of doing all that manual work to create the data set that they need, but also opens up the door to just create all kinds of different data products throughout the ecosystem that can be used for reporting, for agents, or even for audits, right? So that's more or less what we wanted to cover with this. So what we're hoping you can take away from all this material is a couple of things. So Nick, do you kind of want to talk about what you've seen in terms of how organizations can self-assess and understanding where they are in the analytical maturity curve?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the first thing I would ask yourself, as a pretty basic rule of thumb, is your data all in Excel or not? Because if they're in Excel, then you're probably somewhere in the middle, and you're literally part of that statistic where you're in the middle or higher, and you don't have that foundation. I'm not saying Excel isn't a good thing, and it's again, it's good for what it's used for. But if you really want to start leveraging more, you will get bottlenecked by that, and then you'll be in that conversation of trying to choose your reports and build your BI in a different way. So you're going to end up there. It's just the easiest thing to ask yourself. And the other point there is to ask yourself if you're really getting the numbers that you expect, right? And you trust them. Because if you trust them, I mean, again, you're going to get, and they're built off of Excel, for example, you're going to get to that data infrastructure problem later, but you can continue using the reports for now until you have that break or want something more, and then you'll change it, right? And I really encourage people to look at that curve, because it is a map, and it is, in my opinion, the best way an organization can plan their analytics and by extension their AI leveraging journey, right? If we can go back, it's good to see. just asking yourself, okay, where am I here? Where does my company fit in? And you might have to, like, usually when I go into companies and do this, we take all their different reports and literally, map them out. Okay, you're here with this, you're here with that, but then obviously they all tie back into the data infrastructure, which is, below in those first two blocks, right? So, if that's one thing you could take away from my part of the discussion today, it's definitely where are you on this curve, right? And how can you get to where you want to be? I'm gonna go back to that slide.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
What else was next? Yeah, and then at that point, what levels have you skipped, right? Like using that statistic, everyone has skipped the first 2 points, mostly, even in my organization too, right? Like I'm guilty of doing that stuff myself because there are other problems that I need to focus on, but I always pull back and fix those as part of the journey of my company as well, right? So, do you have anything else in this point, Will?
Just to add on, from a platforming perspective, you definitely want to leverage AI as upstream as possible so that you can reap the rewards of having it produce better information to be consumed by humans downstream, right? And then really think about in terms of use cases, like what's its role in making my data actionable? Is it transforming it, so cleaning it up? Is it inferring relationships and making assumptions or different understandings than I can see when I'm just looking at a screen of information? Or is it more usable in producing specific outputs that something like my customer data platform can consume for segmentation or something like that? Or maybe it's all the above, right? It's really just thinking about what can I do to make my information more actionable? And in that, is there something that, a large language model or machine learning model could be used to automate that? So those are the main points. Thank you guys so much for the space to present this. We really appreciate it. Yeah, you're welcome to add us on LinkedIn if you haven't already. And if you have questions or anything, I think, Nick, you got time now, or I've got time now, so I'm happy to field stuff.
Yeah, I got some questions for sure. I mean, we talked about a lot, and I don't know how familiar with people are with all this stuff. So it's nice to see, or it's good to see where everyone is in terms of like leveraging this stuff. It's new to everyone, I think, but we'll see.
Please stay in chat. I know Diane's here too. I actually have to jet, unfortunately, because I have another call that just kicked off. But I'm glad you wrapped up right when you did, because I was just about to jump off. That was fantastic. Lots of good things that made me kind of sit back and be like, oh, I never really thought of it that way, or we need to think about it. So thank you both for that. That was awesome. I appreciate it, and I'm sure other people will have a few questions. So great job, guys. Thanks.
Welcome. Great seeing you. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, just to echo what Malcolm said, great presentation. It was super interesting. So I appreciate hearing what all you guys had to say.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad. Seems like we had a lot of people chatting throughout, which is good.
Yeah, super interesting conversation. Anybody have any questions for Will or Nick?
Just putting it out there, if you want to connect with myself, obviously Will too, ask us any questions about all this stuff. I'm always happy to talk about it. I do a lot of work on Business Central and Dynamics, like I said before too. So I think a lot of people in this chat might be familiar with that, obviously, if you're interested. Talking about it more.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys. Lots of really great questions to go back and reflect on. And I'm sure once we've done that, we'll be connecting with more questions. So thanks again for your time. We really appreciate it. And everybody, we will see you next month.
Bye. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.